The scene then transitions to the border town, where the witches and others have finally returned from Silver City after their successful mission. Prince is hosting a grand feast for everyone that night. The atmosphere is lively, with everyone clinking their glasses in a toast. Old Man Barov asks for another toast, this time for Chief Knight Carter, who is about to tie the knot with Miss May. Meanwhile, our little Lightning demands a glass of wine for herself. Wendy reluctantly agrees to the request with a promise that it'll only be one glass. Anna then turns to the prince, and he promptly welcomes her, noting that it must have been a hard journey for her. But she reminds him with a smile that he's already asked this before, and her answer will still remain the same. As they continue chatting, Lightning jumps in between them, eager to hear something good from the prince as well. The prince casually acknowledges her, saying she did well too, making the girl prouder than ever. Her enthusiasm gets the best of her, and she quickly kisses the prince on the cheek. The prince then blushingly asks if this is some kind of custom in the fjords where one must kiss the other person. Lightning enthusiastically confirms that it is, or at least, that's what her father told her. Meanwhile, Sylvie is utterly embarrassed watching Lightning kiss the prince like this, and seeing her bewildered reaction, the prince can't help but wonder if this custom even really exists. Meanwhile, Knight Carter and the old man are still caught up in discussions about Carter's potential marriage. Carter can't help but blush as he explains that the prince has already approved and even offered to help organize the wedding. Over by the side, Sister Lily is absolutely amazed by a piece of bread made from leftover scraps used for explosives. Our little Maggie, who just ate a lot of it, is startled and wonders if her stomach might explode. As everyone is enjoying the evening, the prince steps out onto the balcony. Suddenly, Nightingale appears and grabs him by the shoulder. He looks at her with a smile as she advises him to be careful not to catch a cold. She then asks what's on his mind, and the prince casually replies that he just had a sudden urge to take a look at his territory. She notices how the town is still bustling, even though it's nighttime, and the streets are full of people. That's when the prince reminds her that the premiere of the new drama, Dawn, is happening tonight. For most of the newcomers to the town, it's probably their first show in months, so they're eager to see Miss May and Miss Irene again. Nightingale then reflects on how, almost a year ago, this place was nearly a ghost town when she first snuck in. Now even from up here, she can feel the joyful atmosphere. The prince admits he still has a lot to do, such as improving infrastructure, healthcare, education, and more. He's determined to transform the Western Territory into a solid foundation for unification. But when Nightingale asks what he plans to do about the witches, he reassures her that he's committed to supporting them as well. We then see Sister Lightning sneaking some food into her pouch. But just as she's doing it, Maggie catches her red-handed, leaving her utterly embarrassed. Quickly, she whispers to Maggie to keep quiet, and tells her she's found an interesting place in the misty forest she plans to explore tomorrow, so she asks her friend if she'd like to come along. Not surprisingly, Maggie agrees right away. The adventurous girl then tells her to pack rations and supplies for a day, and don't forget some weapons too. And finally, she makes sure Maggie knows this exploration is a secret, and Maggie promises to keep it hush-hush. The next day, they head out to the misty forest. Maggie seems a bit let down, expecting it to be as exciting as stealing hawk eggs, but the gloomy atmosphere doesn't quite meet her expectations. Lightning reassures her, saying that while a hawk's nest only has a couple of eggs, these ancient ruins might have some old books or other treasures worth finding. Lightning reassures her that if they find something cool, the prince will reward them with a whole basket of eggs. She can cook them however she wants, and they'll last a while. Hearing this, Maggie's eyes light up, and she excitedly urges Lightning to hurry up and find those books. As they're about to enter the ruins, Lightning tells Maggie to keep it quiet because there might be devils around. This gives Maggie the shivers, but they keep moving. Before they enter the ruins, we hear Lightning thoughts where she thinks about how every time she picks up speed flying, it feels like there's a devil chasing her. This fear started back when she was exploring the stone tower. Her dad used to say that fear comes from the unknown, and that to beat it, you've got to face it head on. She's worried that if she can't shake this fear, it'll be tough to fly, let alone explore. She also frets that the prince might be mad at her later or even punish her, and she's sure the other sisters at the castle will be worried. But despite all that, she's determined to explore. She's brought her revolver, and Maggie's right there with her. She then tells Maggie to wait up top while she checks things out inside. Gathering her courage, she starts stepping in, repeatedly reminding herself to overcome her fear of the unknown and face it head-on. As she peeks inside, she notices that the devil she saw last time isn't there anymore, so she decides to venture further. That's when she hears a familiar, haunting voice begging for help. The voice keeps pleading for someone to save her, and the pain in her voice is evident. The desperate cries make Lightning shiver with dread and fear. Eventually, she can't take it anymore and rushes back outside, scared out of her wits. Maggie suggests that they extinguish their torches and sneak in, reasoning that the devils won't be able to see them. But Lightning points out that they won't be able to see anything either. Maggie then proposes that she could turn into an owl, which would solve the problem of darkness. Lightning finds this idea pretty effective but remains concerned. She explains that if someone can continue to scream for months in complete darkness without changing their tone or pitch, it makes her wonder what's really inside. She speculates that if someone can survive that long in such conditions, they probably have a way to detect prey. Otherwise, they would have starved by now. As Lightning is about to give up, Maggie tries to ignite her adventurous spirit by asking if she really wants to pass up the chance to bust a myth like this. Lightning's eyes light up with excitement, and she insists that a true explorer would never back down from verifying a myth, and it would all be for nothing if they ran away now. On a more serious note, though, Lightning then asks Maggie if she's doing this just for the basket of eggs. Maggie rolls her eyes but can't hide a glimmer of greed in her expression. Anyhow, they head back inside. As they descend the staircase, they notice a strange magic stone embedded in the wall. Lightning pulls out her revolver, ready for whatever might come next. They finally reach the source of the voice and see a bunch of devils guarding a witch trapped inside a crystal-like prison. The witch is unconscious and frozen, but her voice keeps calling out for help. Maggie decides to take a closer look, but Lightning gets terrified. But the little bird reassures her scared friend that the devils look like they're as good as dead. To prove her point, she flies over to one of them and gives it a push. The devil cracks like a rock and starts to crumble. They check the others, and it turns out the rest are also just stone statues. Curious, they look at the witch trapped inside the stone and wonder if she really is a witch. Suddenly, they hear the voice asking for help again. Looking behind the statue, they discover a red stone that seems to be the true source of the voice. With this new discovery, they head back to the border town to report everything to the prince. They explain that there's a witch sealed inside, but it might also be an ordinary person trapped by the witch. The prince asks who was calling for help if the witch is sealed inside. Lightning then shows the prince the box they found behind the sealed witch. Inside is the same crystal they saw earlier, which seems to be linked to the mysterious voice. Lightning quickly activates the crystal, and the voice coming from it spooks the prince. Just then, Nightingale reappears and confirms that she can detect faint traces of magic, similar to the kind witches use. The prince deduces that this must be a magical recording, and that the woman sealed inside is likely a witch. He then asks Lightning if there were any other stones like this. Lightning admits she wasn't paying much attention, as most of the place was flooded, and she was focused on getting the news to him. The prince gives her a gentle tap on the head and tells her not to face danger alone in the future, especially with situations like this. Lightning blushes, touched by the prince's kind but firm advice. The prince then instructs Nightingale to summon all members of the Witch Union and Iron Axe to the office, as their investigation into the ruins is about to begin, and they need to prepare. Once everyone is gathered in the council room, the prince explains that they've found a crystal coffin inside the ancient ruins that shows no signs of deterioration. In the moist underground environment, they discovered a magic stone that emits cries for help, and a group of devils turned into stone statues. He asks the council for their thoughts on the matter. Anna quickly asks if the prince is suggesting that the person trapped inside is a witch. The prince agrees, saying that if she's still alive, they might learn more about what happened hundreds of years ago. However, Sister Scroll and Lady Leaf voice their concerns. They point out that if she is a witch, there's a chance she might not be on their side. The prince agrees with their concerns and notes that the ruins are from the church, so she might be with the church as well, and by the looks of her appearance might have been a high-status member. If she's truly a witch, things could get tricky. Lily jumps in, calling everyone crazy for assuming the witch must be on their side. She questions who could survive for 400 years, and speculates that the person inside might crumble when the crystal shatters. Lightning argues that the witch looks alive, with color in her skin and lips, which sets her apart from the dead devils. Wendy then starts pinching Lightning's cheeks, insisting that it doesn't matter if the witch is alive or not, because they need to give it a try. Wendy points out that if the woman is really a witch from the church, they just need to put a stone of divine judgment on her. With Anna and Nightingale on their side, it shouldn't be too difficult to restrain her if necessary. The key thing is to find out what she knows about the events from 400 years ago. The prince agrees, emphasizing that understanding devil intel is vital for the town. If the church wants to hide their existence, the truth they're hiding must be significant. Learning it beforehand could give them a crucial advantage when they need it the most. He then asks Iron Axe to report on the First Army. Iron Axe explains that they can only deploy 50 men from the First Army. Most of the squad members are out recruiting refugees, leaving only 500 soldiers in the town. He also reminds the prince that while Timothy may have suffered an attack from the heavens, there's a risk he might target the western region at any time. The First Army must be well prepared to defend the town. The prince acknowledges that deploying only 50 men isn't ideal, as devils can throw spears and they could suffer heavy losses. He suggests a better approach would be a simultaneous push by both ground troops and a hot air balloon, with witches handling close combat and infantry focusing on ranged attacks. Suddenly, they hear commotion outside. When they look, they see heavy snow falling, signaling the arrival of months of demons. Right on cue, monsters start appearing on the other side of the wall. Wendy points out that they're still in the last month of autumn, so it's strange for it to be snowing. Iron Axe explains that this is unusual. They've been living in the town for 7 or 8 years and have never seen anything like this before. The prince opens the window and extends his hand out, clearly annoyed to see the snow arriving a month earlier than expected. The scene transitions to the fjords, at Slumber Island, where Thunder, Lightning's father, is visiting the witches. Princess Tilly expresses surprise at his visit, because she did not imagine that the first customer of Slumber Spell is Thunder himself. She then thanks him for the help to explore the ruins for the last time, and Thunder reassures her that there's no need for gratitude and that he's willing to come again, and they don't have to pay him anything for tagging along. Tilly then asks if he always intended to come, to which Thunder reveals that he is an adventurer through and through, so he will always be ready for his next adventure. He was shocked by what he saw at the ruins through that telescope, particularly a stone door on a cliff, and he's very curious to learn more about it. He wanted to fly there immediately. If you can't recall, Thunder is mentioning the ruins where Princess Tilly found the scriptures. Tilly shares that she's planning to visit the border town to speak with the leader of the Witch Union and to witness the months of demons herself. She invites Thunder to join her. Thunder declines, saying he can't go because he doesn't want his daughter to tag along with him and get involved in risky explorations. He lost her mother and doesn't want to risk losing her too. Tilly reassures him that she will ensure nothing happens to Lightning, as she is one of the witches. Back to the business matter, Ash brings out the contract papers. Tilly reminds him that while he has been very helpful, employing witches is not free. The man also agrees, acknowledging that business is business, and this is a common tradition. Once Thunder parts his way after paying his dues, Ash is left bewildered by how Thunder has so much money. Tilly explains that it's not surprising because Thunder is the most famous explorer in the Bay, and discovering new territories and treasures brings him great wealth. Ash then raises a concern that creating a business organization like Slumber Spell could bring them wealth but might also attract the church's attention to the witch's power. Tilly responds that she doesn't care about the money. Her goal is to help more people understand Slumber Island, build connections, and show that witches are harmless. Just like Thunder, she also believes that fear comes from the unknown, and witches are no different. The fear in the Bay and the kingdom stems from the church's lies and the public's ignorance. Tilly then asks about Maggie and why she hasn't returned to the island yet. She wonders if something happened over there, so she asks Ash about it. Ash casually replies, saying maybe there's just a delay, or maybe Maggie doesn't want to come back. Compared to the Bay, the quality of life in Bordertown is much better, so that could be why Maggie doesn't want to return. She also reminds Tilly that this was the exact reason she was against sending witches there in the first place, and she is worried that Lotus and Honey might not want to come back either. That's when Tilly decides she'll just visit Bordertown herself. Upon hearing this, Ash gets frantic and asks if they're leaving right now. The princess calmly reminds her that she's already promised to help fight the demons, and they can bring some of the witches back to the island as well. Plus, if they don't have Lotus, the immigrants from Crescent Bay won't have anywhere to stay next year. They desperately need Lotus to help build homes on Slumber Island. Ash then reminds her that they still have a month until winter, but the princess explains that it's going to take time to get to Border Town, and besides, if something really has happened there, it's better to go sooner and help out. Plus, she's curious to see how her annoying brother is doing these days. The scene then cuts to Border Town, at the wall. Winter has arrived, and the soldiers are fighting off monsters. The prince asks for a report, and Knight Carter quickly explains that most of the First Army has combat experience with rifles. A 100-meter section of the wall only needs 10 guards to fend off the demons, making it hard for the wolves to even reach the wall. The monsters are basically target practice for the soldiers. As long as no hybrids show up, the demons don't stand a chance. The prince, pleased with the report, encourages the soldiers to keep up the good work. The prince is clearly glad to see his soldiers performing so well. Their energy and discipline are completely different from the ragtag civilian army they were about a year ago. Suddenly, the prince hears a commotion nearby. Knight Carter quickly explains that there's trouble brewing in the Western District, where the refugees are staying. We then see two commoners duking it out while people on the sidelines cheer for their fellow citizens. A local citizen from Border Town is getting beaten up pretty badly by a tough refugee, and the refugee doesn't seem to be backing down. That's when Knight Carter steps in, pins the rowdy guy to the ground, and commands him to stop fighting in the name of His Highness. The prince also arrives at the scene and walks over to the injured citizen lying on the ground. He asks for the man's name, and the man responds that his name is Kaya Harris, a member of the city hall. Kaya explains that the refugee was the first to throw a punch while he was just distributing rations. According to Kaya, the refugee launched himself at him like a dog. The refugee, however, points out that's not the whole story. He claims that people are taking advantage of the situation and charging money for rations that were supposed to be free. Hearing this, the prince reflects that all the refugees from the Western Legion have been processed, and only craftsmen or literate people were moved, so commoners are supposed to be left behind. However, this man's vocabulary and demeanor suggest he might not be a typical commoner. The prince turns to the man and states that the rations are indeed free. Before their integration into Border Town, all rations and shelter were promised to be free, and that promise still stands. Everyone present hailed their prince for such generosity. However, the prince makes it clear that fistfights are against the law, especially when they involve a city hall member. He instructs his soldiers to round up everyone involved and states that he will personally oversee the matter. He then turns to Kaya and says he wants to speak with him as well. Back at the castle, both fighters are brought before the prince. He interrogates Kaya about why he intentionally charged refugees for rations during distribution, and this is exactly what led to the conflict between them and the farmers. Kaya, though reluctant, admits to the crime he committed. The old man, Barov, tells the prince that, traditionally, crimes committed by elites would only result in a fine of a few golden royals, while a civilian attacking an elite could face punishments ranging from execution to whipping. However, the prince points out that Kaya is not an elite and has been stripped of his knighthood long ago. Barov agrees and adds that in the past, punishment entirely depended on the ruler's discretion. The prince then asks why there isn't a set law for these situations and wonders if there are any standard punishments other than amputation or whipping, such as imprisonment. Barov explains that imprisoning someone isn't really a punishment, as the prison is meant for holding suspects until their trial. Keeping them locked up means having to feed them, which could be considered a reward rather than a punishment. Reflecting on this, the prince realizes that the punishment methods from his old world might not be suitable here. He decides to determine the appropriate punishment himself. The prince delivers his final verdict, stating that Kaya Harris is guilty of malfeasance and blackmailing refugees. As punishment, Kaya will be expelled from the city and sentenced to 10 years of labor in the mines. He will also be fined triple the amount he earned through blackmail. The refugee named Wade will receive 10 lashes for attacking a public official. The civilians who participated in the fight can choose between a fine of 2 silvers or 5 lashes. Additionally, rations will continue to be distributed for free, and all money obtained through blackmail will be refunded. And lastly, the sentences will be carried out publicly. Wade's face lights up at the prospect of free rations, and it seems he would even willingly accept another 10 lashes if it meant continuing to receive the rations. Meanwhile, the prince reflects on how quickly the city hall is expanding, matching the refugee population, and how internal security is becoming increasingly challenging. He does not want to create a prosecution agency because he wants all legislation and judgment powers to stay with him. He's aiming for a simple and effective system that doesn't require a lot of people to enforce the law. Suddenly, Nightingale appears and asks about his thoughts. The prince explains that he's planning to create a new department to oversee the city hall and tackle any threats to the western region. This new department will be independent of both the city hall and the First Army. He wants to name it the Western Security Agency, and she will be the one in charge of this agency. He believes that she is the only one who can uncover the truth, as no one can hide anything from her. The prince offers Nightingale ice cream in the winter and other treats she loves as an incentive. However, she quickly pinches his hand and tells him it doesn't matter, because she will always agree with whatever he wants her to do. Wade finishes taking his 10 lashes, and an old man from his group looks at his back, which is covered in dried blood. The old man suggests rubbing some ash on the wounds, but Wade says there's no need, because the blood has already dried, and the knight told him it would heal in 2 or 3 days. The old man isn't convinced, warning that it might take longer because the wounds could get infected, leading to sores. Wade, however, says something surprising. He claims that he doesn't feel any pain at all. Instead, there's a mild itching and a cool sensation, which he takes as a sign that he's already healing. He explains that after the lashes, they poured a bucket of water on his back, and although he expected it to hurt, it didn't. The knight even mentioned that the water could eliminate viruses and bacteria. The old man is completely baffled by Wade's explanation, and they both suspect it might have something to do with the witches. The old man tells Wade he shouldn't have gotten into the fight in the first place. Wade counters by explaining that if he hadn't exposed the crooked ration distributors, they'd still be swindling everyone out of their money. He mentions how the prince regularly appears at the Western Wall during the day, and since he promised the rations would be free, he wouldn't tolerate anything that sullied his name. Exposing the scam was the best way to make sure the prince found out, even if it took a simple scuffle to get his attention. Wade also claims he did his research and found out that everyone, from local citizens to indentured farmers, praised the prince for his generosity. Wade then tells the old man that once he recovers, he's going back to work moving those strange weapons and will make enough money for the both of them. The old man reminds Wade that he could have lived in the inner district with the other craftsmen, but Wade refuses to leave the old man behind. He explains that when Golden Wheat City was under attack, the old man helped him, and without that assistance, Wade believes he would have died. Wade then tells his old friend that he heard the prince is recruiting people for public security and plans to give it a shot when the time comes. The scene shifts to a boat sailing through the sea, carrying witches en route to Border Town. Inside, they're enjoying a meal, enhanced by seasonings like salt and peppers. A blonde witch relishes the taste and playfully teases Ash, suggesting she's probably forgotten what good food tastes like after living in Border Town. As expected, Ash gets annoyed, and the two get into an argument, Ash defending Border Town and its food, while the blonde witch mocks it. Just as their banter escalates, they hear noises from outside. A crew member informs them that multiple monsters are approaching. Princess Tilly gets anxious when she hears about the monsters and asks if they're demons. Once outside, they encounter hybrid fish monsters with legs. The blonde witch materializes a weapon and challenges Ash to a competition. Whoever kills more monsters will be considered stronger. But Ash seems uninterested and just brushes off the challenge, but they both prepare for battle.